Hi, everybody. It's Stephanie Parra, Government Relations Director here at the Arizona Education Association. First of all, just thank you all for being out here on a Saturday, for your commitment to your students, and really for your commitment to the Red for Ed movement. It's been so inspiring to watch all of you build and grow power in our state for education professionals. And so I'm so grateful for all of the work that you do. And I will tell you that down at the legislature, it feels really, really great to have that sense of having nearly 50,000 people behind me, 50,000 educators who are committed to changing the standards that we have here in Arizona for our schools. So with that said, I want to give you guys kind of an update on where we are in the legislative session and what you can expect over the next week or two. So currently we are knee deep in our budget negotiations. There is a lot of kind of scurrying to try to get a budget proposal locked in, get a budget in place. There is so much angst from the governor's office, actually, that he got 8 bills on his desk today and vetoed every single one of them. Sent a message to the legislators that he does not want to sign any more bills until they send him a budget that includes this 20% pay increase for teachers. And so I wanted to walk you guys through what his proposal is, what it's actually doing and what it's not doing, and then why we've taken the position that we have taken when it comes to the governor's proposal. So this document might look a little familiar. The governor has put this one-pager out as his plan and proposal, his detailed plan for his 20% by the school year 2020. Hashtag 20 by 2020 is how they're pushing this out on social media. And so what he is saying is that he is going to give Arizona teachers a 20% pay increase by the school year 2020. But if you take a look at his proposal, he's actually outlining this to be broken out over, obviously, several years, over 3 years. So he's taking the 1% from fiscal year 18, which was last year, and doing 9% this year in fiscal year 19 for a total of 10%. And then he's doing 5% in fiscal year 20 and additional 5% in fiscal year 2021. He's also proposing a full restoration of additional assistance, that's district and charter additional assistance, that will be phased in over the course of 5 years. And with fiscal year 19, it begins with a $100 million appropriation. So this sounds like a great proposal for Arizona educators and teachers, and this sounds like we should be, jumping for joy and so excited that the governor has put this proposal forward. So why are we not jumping for joy? Why are we not excited about this proposal? There's actually 3 big reasons why. And the first one being that the governor has identified no new revenue, no sustainable revenue for this pay increase. Okay, so what I mean by that is they are not bringing any new dollars into our general fund, any new dollars into the state, or any new dollars into our public schools. What he is actually doing is he's shuffling the deck around, he's sweeping money from different agencies, and he is kind of cobbling together this 20% pay increase, starting with this 10%. And he's doing the same thing for district additional assistance. Again, there's no sustainable revenue identified for it, but he has managed to say it's going to be $100 million this year, and then in fiscal year 20 we're going to do 168, and then it's going to be 236, 303 and then by fiscal year 2023 we'll get to the 371 million. Unfortunately for the governor, he has no control over future legislatures, and that brings me to my second point. There is no guarantee that this money will get to and stay in our public schools. We what we will see though is that he's going to put this grant proposal together, and he's saying that it's going to be all economic growth and that we don't need to raise taxes because the state economy is growing tremendously, and we're going to see a lot of revenue coming into our state, and that's how we're going to fund the next phase of the pay increase and the next phase of district and charter additional assistance. But when we look at his proposal, and when we kind of take a look at why we don't believe that the governor will be able to pass this in the future, it's because he actually has no control over future legislatures. So again, there's no guarantee because he has not identified a sustainable revenue source that is guaranteed. A legislature can come back next year and say, no, we don't have the money for that, we're going to cut. And actually, when the Joint Legislative Budget Committee put this chart together, and what this shows us here is that when you base the governor's proposal on our April revenue, which is our current revenue now, he can cobble the money together. But when you look at future spending and you continue to base it off of our growth for right now, you'll see that by the time we get to fiscal year 20, it'll be a $265 million cut. And by the time we get to fiscal year 2021, it'll be a $302 million cut. So while you may see, you might get that 10% this year, next year they'll come back and say, no, we don't have the money for it, we're going to cut. And that's why we are very hard on the fact that there needs to be new revenue, there needs to be a dedicated revenue source, because without it, future legislatures are not obligated to the governor's current budget proposal. They can strike that idea and make different plans next year when they come back. And then lastly, the governor has budgeted $34 million for every 1% raise. And this budget estimate is based on a very narrow definition of teacher. So only our classroom teachers of record, teachers that have and carry a roster of students, are the ones that would qualify for this pay increase. So you will recall, if you're a counselor, if you are a social worker, if you are a nurse, a librarian, a reading intervention specialist, any other certified professional on a campus, you didn't qualify for this 1% increase. And our classified employees also did not qualify for this 1% increase last year. So it only went to the classroom teacher of record that carried a roster. And for us, if you're going to give raises, again, this has got to be inclusive of all education professionals. So because he's only budgeting $34 million for this pay increase, it's going to be very limited in scope and who gets it. Or what you will see is your district will actually take the funds that they receive and they'll appropriate it more evenly across additional employees. So they'll make it so that all their certified professionals get it, but that means that you wouldn't get the 10%. You're actually going to get more like 5 or 6% by the time that they end up spreading the money across employees. So again, I mean, just, in summary, why do we have issues with this proposal? It's just not transparent. The governor is not being honest about what his proposal means, and he is simply selling the community on this talking point that he's going to give a 20% increase by 2020. And it's a nice talking point. It's a nice campaign point to stand on, but it is not based in honesty, truth, or transparency, because when you start kind of peeling the layers of the onion back, we see that his proposal starts to fall apart. And mainly, the main reason why it starts to fall apart is because he has identified no new revenue for our schools. And so we have got to, as educators, learn our lesson from past promises of public school funding. And this handout that you have here kind of shares a little narrative. So we have great colleagues at the Arizona Center for Economic Progress who pulled this together. And it just gives you a little history on Students First. So Students First was 20 years ago. Governor Hall signed it into signed Students First legislation, and this was related to our capital funding, new building construction, promising that we were going to invest in schools and school buildings, but the reality is that there was no dedicated revenue source for this. So the money ran out. And now AEA is part of a lawsuit for capital funding because we are not receiving the money in our schools that we are owed based off of this piece of legislation. They just stopped funding it. Much like, so that happened with Governor Hall. Flash forward to the Napolitano years. She pushed forward full day kindergarten. Again, no revenue was tied to it, and that also fell apart. We don't have full day K funded anymore because there wasn't a new revenue stream tied to it. And so, when the economy sets back a little bit or they have to make cuts, those are the first things to go, the things that they have recently added. And so our biggest fear is that if we don't see a dedicated revenue source for our schools, we are going to start seeing the cuts just so that the governor can get through this election and get his talking point in. They will come back next year and make the cuts to our schools, and we'll just be spinning our wheels again. And so I know we have to ask ourselves, will we get this new dedicated revenue source from this legislature and governor? And we also have to ask ourselves if we trust them to fund our schools. I personally do not feel confident that this governor and legislature will identify new revenue for our schools. They're going to continue to shuffle the deck. They're going to move money around and make sweeps from different pockets to kind of cobble together this 10% increase so that they can maintain the talking point that they have publicly. They're not willing to raise revenue. And you might know this governor has pledged to cut taxes every year that he's in office, and he's done so. And so every time that they cut taxes, those are cuts to our general fund. And until we have a legislature and a governor that truly accepts the fact that we need to have raise revenue in our state and get money to schools and stop cutting taxes and stop diverting money to private schools, we need to invest in our public schools. Until we have the right government, the right governance in our state, we have got to be willing to take matters into our own hands. It's going to be on us as educators in Arizona to go to the voters ourselves and ask them to invest in our schools. And so that's one thing that we are considering right now is, do we put something on the ballot? Is that something that we want voters to start thinking about? What does that look like? We know that we are $1 billion in the hole from 2008, and it's gonna, it took us a long time to get to where we are. We know that it's gonna take us a long time to get out of this hole, but we can make significant strides because voters are on our side. And so that's something that we have to consider. Are we willing to roll up our sleeves and put in the work to get something on the ballot? Getting something on the ballot is not easy. It will require us getting a total of 225,000 signatures. But with the momentum of this movement, and considering that the community is on our side, the public is on our side right now, it's something that we really need to think about. Is this something that we want to do? And so keep that in the back of your minds as we are growing and building momentum through Arizona Educators United and through the Red for Ed movement. How can we take matters into our own hands? Because I know that I do not trust this governor and this legislature to invest in us, and we've got to kind of carry the torch and really think about what we want to do next. So with that, again, thank you all for being here on a Saturday, and thank you for everything that you do for your students every day and the communities that you serve in. It's such an honor to be your government relations director and to represent you down at the Capitol. I have never been prouder to be an educator in Arizona and to represent educators in Arizona. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your training.